Welcome to our panel. This morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, we're going to be talking about managing and incentivizing best practice channel marketing capabilities. And I've got four very cool panelists for you today, and I'll be introducing them in just a moment. We want to make this both very informative and also a little bit of fun. So some of the panelists know each other. So I think we're going to have both a lot of great information and also a really, really good interaction between the panelists. So before we start, let me just talk about how we're going to do it. So very much this is a panel. So you can ask a question in one of two ways. If you look at your control panel on the left-hand side, if you see that arrow there, you can click on the icon to raise your hand. When you do that, we will be able to then unmute you. Everyone is in mute mode at the moment. We will be able to mute you and you will be able to actually ask the question live via the microphone. On the other hand, if you want to, there is a further panel down below, questions in your control panel. And if you want to ask a question via the chat module, simply type it in, press send, and we will then be able to pick up that question. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you've got burning questions on managing and incentivizing best practice channel marketing capabilities, this is your chance to get your questions answered. So before I start, the other thing you can do, at the moment you're seeing all five of our lovely visages. If you just want to see basically the person who's talking, some people prefer to look at these in that mode. If you click on view at the top of the screen and click on who's talking, that will simply show you the individual who's talking when they're answering a question. So without further ado, let's introduce our four panelists. Our first panelist is Ken Fox. He's an accomplished leader for over 20 years experience in the channel. He's got a master's degree in software and an MBA. He runs Channel Mechanics and he's transformed it from a startup into an award-winning SaaS provider that is truly disrupting channel program execution. He's really passionate about enabling their customers to get the most from their partners. Ken also has 4 kids, so in his spare time, he wears that lovely taxi cap and, like most of us who have kids, runs them around absolutely everywhere. Our second panelist is Dan Kelly. Dan is the VP of Strategic Accounts and Partnerships at CR Worldwide. And as a founding partner of CR Worldwide in 2002, Dan helped develop the company from a startup business into the multi-million-pound company that it is today. He's got over 20 years experience in creating, executing successful channel incentive programs, and he's done that for some of the world's biggest technology brands, including companies like Dell, Nuance, and Hewlett-Packard. And Dan will no doubt explain what this is, but he is an orange belt in Krav Maga, whatever that happens to be. And I'm sure we'll give him a chance to explain that in a moment. Our third panelist is Gary Morris, and he's the CEO and founder of Successful Channels. He's had, for 25 years, he's been involved in software as a technology entrepreneur and a product marketing executive and an active LinkedIn blogger, constantly commenting on channel planning and performance management. His latest software company is Successful Channels, and they provide partner business planning, scorecarding, marketing planning, and QBR tools that integrate with the company's PRM. And prior to technology, he held several corporate executive marketing roles with major global brands. And our fourth panelist is Peter Thomas, and he's the VP of Channel Strategy for E2Open. And there he's responsible for the strategy, direction, and integration of E2Open's channel suite. He's also an author. The book is entitled Marketing Multiplied, and this was the first to tackle the challenges of channel marketing. He grew up in Seattle, but he now lives in Boston. Today he keeps a garden, an orchard, and bees, and he likes to play cheesy 80s pop songs on his piano, but he's promised categorically not to do that during the webinar today. So without further ado, I'm going to chip in with the first few questions, but as I said, feel free to raise your hand or type in a question. This is very, very much your session. And the first question I'm going to ask everyone is the key question that I'm sure we get asked by our CFO regularly. Why is the ROI on channel marketing so much poorer than it should be? And Peter, I wonder if you would chip in on that one to start with.
Well, you're just really going deep right off the bat. Okay, so here's what I think. I think it's because it's really hard. It's really, really hard, quite frankly. It's hard to control and measure and fund and execute for a business that you don't control. You know, it is a partnership. So the best you can do as a brand is to try to influence, to enable, to train, to coach, to provide money and recognition and encouragement. But I think by and large, at some point you have to say that's where, you know, my responsibility ends and the partners begins. And so then it becomes a matter of rather than just dominating and mandating, you must execute this way, therefore I can get the ROI. It becomes more of a game of influence. How much can you influence them and encourage them to do the right thing for you and for your brand and theirs?
And Ken, if we pick up on that, what do you think we could, specific things that we can do, picking up on what Peter said, to improve the ROI on our channel marketing?
Yeah, no, that's Peter has done a great summary there. So I suppose, you know, and I think one of the points Peter made was around, you know, it is very hard and it's very difficult to measure it. You know, you're once removed from direct business. You know, some would say that the ROI is significant. It's the actual measurement of it is not recorded, so it's hard to report on it. And then that's back to your question on the CFO. They don't like what you can't report on, Rob. But ultimately, you know, to get the channel partners engaged in, you know, your brand awareness, etc., incentivizing them to do that, you know, that's obviously part of the webinar. But yeah, running incentive programs in parallel with your marketing campaigns to ensure that the partners drive that out into the market and they get rewarded for doing that kind of helps. But ultimately, you need to put the levers in place to record what they're doing, run the campaigns you want them, and then obviously measure those so you can report back.
Mm-hmm. And Dan, do you want to step in on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Guy's saying. It's hard. I think you got to ask yourself, what is it you want to be measuring, or what does your CFO want to be seeing, and do you have the tools in place to be able to measure that? You know, is it you're looking at click-through rates, or, you know, opens on emails, or, you know, pipeline's an easy one to kind of, you know, measure during with dollars, etc. But the other thing that I see as well is you know, how far in the future are you measuring the return on investment? Because, you know, people do look very short term. We've put these dollars in, oh, we've generated some pipeline, and then they switch onto something else. But actually, if you're putting your campaign codes in, or getting you guys to put campaign codes in your CRM, etc., you can really track it through to the end close sale, which may be, you know, a 12-month sales cycle, or, you know, a long sales cycle. So maybe, you know, it's getting your house in order before you set out on the mission, really, I think is the key. What do you want to track, and how do you want to track it?
Mm-hmm. Gary, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest, let's call it, improvement opportunity areas is better coordinating both marketing, which is MDF. It's typically a partner pull. Your partners are requesting MDF funds. You're helping them execute, plan, and measure. And sales, which is incentive driven, which unfortunately is more of a push. Typically, incentive programs are pushed onto a partner, whether or not it's a priority, whether or not it's coordinated with the pull strategy. So there's a disconnect between what the sales team of the partner organization is working on, which can be influenced by incentives, and what the marketing team is working on. So I think there's a huge opportunity, especially for MDF or fund management, is to coordinate, allow partners to request both MDF with incentives on an individual partner basis. I think that's a vision for the future that says, let's enable and support a coordinated marketing and sales effort, so lead generation and partner and partner sales activities are coordinated, and all oars are pulling on this in the same direction.
Mm-hmm. I think someone said, and I'd agree, that one of the biggest challenges is actually recording the information and providing the information in a meaningful way to people like the CFO. So let's get specific. What are the kind of tools that people should have in place? What are the kind of tools that you see that are effective in helping your customers do this?
Well, going back to what Dan was talking about, I think I just want to expand on that for a minute. I think it starts with deciding what you really truly do want to measure, and getting alignment around that from a business standpoint. What your channel marketer, your channel chief or your global channel leader might want to measure may be totally different than what a CFO wants. And sometimes I think, if we're looking at ourselves honestly, we might say that sometimes marketers use a lot of vanity metrics like email open rates and clicks and website visits and things that honestly don't really create a measurable impact on the business from a financial standpoint. So I think that it's important to really get alignment on that first, and I'll let my colleagues speak to the tooling, because there's any number of ways to collect and report that data.
Ken, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, so I suppose, in terms of measuring and the automation of it, I think automation is key to running any fund management program. Whether it's marketing, joint marketing, co-op, whatever, having the tools or processes in place to make it easy for the partner to come in and request the funds or make their claim. But then if you're driving them to a tool to do that, have it in such a way it's very easy for them to use, and then you can start to drive the activities that you want them to participate in and the activities that you want them to do. So whether that's lead gen, demand creation, whatever it is that you want to do, it's not kind of freelance anymore. So you're starting to create the demand for what you want them to seed the market with, or create the awareness of your brand in the market. And that ultimately comes back to the first question. It makes it a lot easier for you to measure that, tag it at the front end and track it all the way through to the end. Is that closed business? Which demand gen campaign worked better than other? How many leads did I get out of it? Right through to closed business. So you can actually say, for this campaign, I generated X amount of revenue out of it. So it's the old thing of, 50% of my marketing dollars work. I just don't know which 50% it is. You now can actually start to put the levers in there to see what's working and what's not. And what works with one partner in a geo typically works for others. So you can start to cross-pollinate that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And specific tools, Ken, that people should be looking at. Give people some guidance.
Yeah, so there's, obviously ourselves, Rod, we run, many MDF programs. I think the key is not to, but to get the hell away from spreadsheets, basically, because partners have no visibility to your spreadsheets. There's plenty of tools out there. Use an automated platform provided in a single pane of glass to your partners so that they can actually work with you. Lower that threshold to do business, because we see ease of doing business is the #1 fall down point for vendors going to market through the channel. We hear it every single day.
Mm-hmm. And Dan, do you want to step in on that one?
Just to back up exactly what Ken's last point was there, that I think ease of doing business and giving your partners the access to the tools. And there's a lot of talk about having multiple vendors like ourselves with all different platforms in there, but how can you get an integrated solution? So there's one point of entry for a partner to go in and see all this data, the single pane of glass I think Kenneth mentioned, then make it really easy for the guys to track and use these tools, whether they're registering deals, doing campaigns, whatever it is, because that's going to get the highest level of engagement. So I think, yeah, if you want to get high ROI, you've got to make it accessible for the guys to use.
Mm-hmm. Gary, any thoughts on that one?
Yes, well, given what we do, we think it all starts with the business plan. You start with the business plan, and what we found gets high. Partners are not experts at creating business plans, they're not experts at marketing plans, they're not experts at marketing execution. So the more that you can kind of bake in or recommend a series, here's some recommended goals, the types of goals, whether it's penetrate healthcare market or increase penetration of the new security compliance solution. And then here are the recommended strategies and tactics that the vendor would align with that and build that right into the marketing planning tool. That's what we do. And so that way it's easy for them to select an objective, recommend a strategy, recommend a tactic, and then actually forecast what is a reasonable expectation for an event. I mean, what we found is, I'm sure those of you guys that do MDF, that MDF requests come in on the back of a napkin, in an email, in a PowerPoint, in a voicemail, and they're all, we give 5 different estimates for the same event. So having a consistent, disciplined way of estimating what's a reasonable number of registrants for this type of event, what's the expectation for registration conversion into attendance, and what's the conversion from attendance into a sales qualified lead, et cetera, helping them through those steps. So you're setting expectations and then coordinating, as Ken was saying, with campaign IDs through either directly reporting from the marketing execution vendor or in tracking that in Salesforce or whatever CRM you have, all the way through the pipeline.
Okay, we got a great question coming through here from Tony Stirrup, and the question is: partners deal with multiple vendors. There's a lot of research that says the average partner deals with up to 16 different vendors. If each of those vendors wants their partner to use their tool, that actually makes the partner's life extraordinarily difficult. What can the vendors do to really help alleviate that problem? I'm dealing with 16 vendors. They've all got their own tools. That's 16 tools. And as a partner, that makes my life extraordinarily difficult.
This is a this is a landmine, but I'm gonna jump in. So this is a philosophical problem in the industry, and we've heard this many times. And it's like the lighthouse effect. So a lighthouse is on land, and the taxpayers that live around that lighthouse pay for the lighthouse. The beneficiary of the lighthouse are the ships that pass through the harbor safely so that they don't end up on the rocks. And they don't pay anything for that. They just get the benefit of the lighthouse. And the equivalent situation here is that the platform, the tool, the 16, one of 16 is paid for by the brand, but the partners don't pay anything for it, yet they're the primary user, consumer, and beneficiary of it, ostensibly. And so there's a misalignment there, because if the partners were paying for it, then you just have one platform and you'd have all 16 vendors inside of one, and it would be very easy. But that's not how it is, because no brand wants to pay to subsidize their competition. So that's why they want their own platform that only talks about NetApp, and then Pure has a different one, and then somebody else has a different one. And if you sell all 3 of those products, you're expected to use all 3 of those platforms. And so I am empathetic to that. I don't really have a great answer about how we solve for that problem to make this one platform to rule them all, because there's really nobody that has an economic interest in subsidizing that. But I would love to hear what the panel says about that.
Ken,
I agree. Sorry.
Go on, Dan.
Yeah, I agree with Peter. I think there isn't a solution on the horizon for that, because everybody's got their own best interests at heart. The only thing you can do, as we talked about earlier, is make it easy to use, supply training, give them the reason why, and the how, and then set them on the way, because no one vendor is going to kind of, like you say, pay for somebody else's success. So unfortunately, it is where it is. Let's just make their lives easier.
Yeah, and I can say from a vendor's perspective, it can be a differentiator. So if you have, a platform that's very easy for that partner, it will kind of tend to drive the partner towards that vendor or get preference. I think Forrester done research a couple of years back, and they said, top 3 are price, brand, and ease of doing business. So it kind of comes back to the ease of doing business. If your MDF is much easier to go in and request and claim, and you get paid on time, and you get to see the types of activities that vendor wants to see in the market, they'll generally win out. So but it is challenging. We work with a lot of partners on the other side, and they say, geez, I have to go to 12 different portals to do this. And then you kind of get into it with them, and they say, well, I tend to go to this one because it's easier. So it's an absolute, it all kind of marries back to the same point.
Okay, Gary, any thoughts?
Well, just I think that Peter said, you follow the money. The money is all vendor incremented in this industry. So, you know, every time I go to a channel trade show, I try to just maybe more just because it's just the personality. I go to every single distributor booth and I say, are you a visionary? You are the nexus of this problem. You're the one that theoretically could solve this problem. Now, there's all kinds of trade-offs and issues with that, but you know, because I'm representing planning and performance management. How about creating a comprehensive cross-brand business plan, scorecard, QBR for that vendor? What about doing that? And every time, you know, there's a lot of enthusiasm. I like this, but they come back to, well, where is our bread buttered? Our bread is buttered by individual vendors, one at a time. So, you know, there is no easy solution, but I think we can just talk about it. I do think there's an opportunity for a visionary distributor to coordinate some type of a planning, marketing execution, kind of a syndicated model to do that. And there's an opportunity if there's a visionary distributor that's out there, because they're the nexus. They're the place where this is the best opportunity.
Gary is 100% right. They're absolutely the right type of business to be able to do that if there was anybody that could consolidate it. They are typically pretty coin operated and operating on very thin margins. And so it takes somebody with a vision. I think it also takes somebody that wants to take a risk and say, you know, we're going to bring all this together because it is the best thing for our partners. Because really what the partner wants is they want a marketing piece that has 3 solutions in it. They want a marketing program that has 3 or 4 stacks. You know, they want that every single time. They don't want to go to market with a point solution every single time. And the disties are the ones that are perfectly positioned for it.
And incentives, by the way, and incentives, marketing and incentives.
So I think the answer to that for everyone on the call, and there are a lot of you, is apply pressure to your distributors.
Yeah.
Tell them that they need to be the point person, and they need to pull this together, because I agree they are probably the only people capable of doing it. Have another question here, and this also ties into some of the other things we're involved in. We also run a community of 5,500 managed service providers. And when you talk to them about marketing, nobody actually set up an MSP because they came from a marketing background. They either came from a technical background or they came from a sales background. And the vast majority of people in that community don't have even a part-time experienced marketing person in the company. So what do you think are the pros and cons of concierge marketing versus partner a la carte marketing, and how do you deal with that? So Ken, maybe I can start with you on that one.
Whew, that's some question. Yeah, you know, it depends on how deep your pockets are really to put funds towards all of those kinds of things. You know, it costs quite a bit to have both models or a mix of both. But you know, again, depending on what you're trying to achieve, the creation of your program and the campaigns that you want to offer within that program, it's all about the allocation of the funds that you're going to do. So if you want to go down the concierge route, you know, and use a third-party provider to work with the partners to provide whatever campaigns, you know, whether it's, you know, lead gen, marketing, demand, whatever it is that you want to do. You know, lots of people do that. We work with folks and they use our MDF tool and we route those requests off to many concierge services to do that. Again, it's kind of, are they fit for purpose really? You know, do they work? And it comes back to almost measuring the ROI to see, because, you know, people do, I see vendors spending a lot of money on these, and I don't always see the return even when you do try to measure it. So it's kind of, I think a mixture of both really, Rod. And it sometimes comes down to the vertical you're in, the partners you work with, the products. It could be the sales cycle. There's so many variables that you kind of throw into the mix to see which combination of, you know, the concierge versus direct marketing services you want to offer. So yeah, no real easy answer without getting into the details of the vendor, the offer, the partner types they work with, and the sales cycle or the typical sales cycle of their particular offer.
Gary, do you want to chip in on that one?
Well, I think the partner that is self-serve, that is completely self-sufficient is the exception, is not the rule. So uh, it's just not their area of expertise. They haven't, I'm not saying there aren't a percentage, but I don't know, 20% maybe. The other 70 to 80% are really need help. So let's be honest, this is a services model. It's not a pure software model where you can, offer these self-service tools, because compliance is going to continue to be low, simply because they either don't have the skills or they don't have the mental energy to invest in learning some web-based tool.
Mm-hmm. Peter.
I think there's a partner maturity model. I think that you can analyze and stratify your partner community based on their marketing competency. So if you take the similar tiering, a bronze, silver, gold tiering, and apply that to your partners in terms of highly mature, highly evolved, good marketing engine in place, that would be the really small percentage Gary was talking about, all the way down to the totally immature, no marketing acumen, no marketing staff to help with that, and needs a lot of help all the way at the bottom. And that would be the vast majority, and specifically the MSPs you were talking about. What you then do is say, okay, well, my engagement level needs to be adapted to meet them where they are. So if they're at the very bottom of the pyramid, then you will take a almost entirely for partner marketing approach. In other words, you will do it for them. You or a concierge or somebody will click the button, will co-brand the asset, will execute the incentive, will engage the agency, will do whatever it is, everything on behalf. That is, if you want to optimize that partner. Because they simply won't do it, like Gary was saying. They don't have the skill or the time or whatever, the inclination to do it. And then as you work up the hierarchy, you will be able to do less for partners that have more acumen and energy and appetite for marketing, and enable them more by providing them with great content and services and money and things that are lower touch for you from an organizational standpoint.
Mm-hmm. And Dan, picking up on that, I mean, the other key issue we're seeing more and more today is that partners are coming across the customer when they're well down the sales funnel, and in a fairly advanced stage towards making a decision. Does that put more emphasis on the vendor themselves to do more, to carry more of the marketing burden?
I think the buyer journey is a lot talked about it on the internet and everywhere else, isn't there? The buyer's more educated these days. They kind of singled out X amount of vendors before they even kind of pick up the phone or send the email, whatever it is. So yeah, I think it's down. There's a responsibility on the vendors to enable the partners and the guys at the front line to be able to drop in the relevant information at the right point in the buying cycle. And they're the experts on their products. They know what the products deliver and how they want to be consumed. So by pooling the data they have from all the the partners and how they see those deals constructed, then yeah, I think there's a responsibility for them to be supplying the right information at the right time to map to that buyer journey. And to one of the guys mentioned before, your partners are different. They've got different specialities, different skill sets, different knowledge, different markets they operate in. So building the plan with your partner, asking them what they want to receive, and understanding their customer base, then I think that's where the vendors need to be really smart about the content they provide to that specific partner, rather than just the one size fits all, here's our product sheet.
Okay, I've got another really interesting question coming through here. Can any of you speak to the differences in partner marketing strategies based on product life cycle stage? So what should you be doing relative to the life cycle of the product, whether it's early stage, mid stage, or getting towards the end of its life? What are the kinds of things you should be doing at each of those stages? Peter, you're nodding frantically, so I'll bring you in on that one.
That's a really good question, and I want to compliment the asker of it. It's very insightful. My gut instinct says that if you have a product that is early in release, it's a lot of excitement, top of the funnel awareness building. Probably it's innovative, probably it's disruptive, probably there's a lot of, sort of eyeball grabbing, attention grabbing type of marketing you want to do, really loud stuff. And you do that directly, and you also take that direct stuff and enable your channel to do it. If it's a product that is more end of life in a highly saturated market, I'm assuming it's saturated at that point, because any product that's end of life must have a lot of competition at that point. Then it's transactional marketing, and it's really more to partner marketing about how you can make, create an annuity business by selling more of this LaserJet ink, that kind of thing, right? Like it's more of a two partner value prop around how they can keep money coming in by continuing to sell this particular product, because there's no sizzle left. It's an end of life product. It's a highly saturated market, so it really just becomes an economic discussion at that point.
Anyone else want to come in on that one? Dan?
I just add, I mean, I've got not as much experience of that, I think, as Peter's got, but we've definitely been integral in with software vendors running a lot of spiffs or reward programs, maximizing the opportunity when something's coming to end of life. You've already got something else coming out, in a certain date. So preparing your partner sales teams for that opportunity, giving them the right messaging, giving the right collateral, and also incenting them to get on the phone and talk to those customers. It's a ready-made customer base to go and attack. So we've run lots of those programs with great success before. So rather than seeing it, it's the end of your life of your product, but what a massive opportunity to start that sizzle again and those eyeball catching moments that Peter mentioned. So yeah, that's where we've got experience of that.
Okay. Got another question coming through now. They're coming through fairly thick and fast, but again, if you've got any questions, please stick your hand up or type in the question. Accepting that channel partners are not very capable, or many of them are not very capable in terms of channel marketing. Are there any training programs that you guys have experience of that have really worked to improve that situation?
Let me take this. It picks up a little bit on what Peter said earlier. This is a scorecard. The ability to scorecards or partner profiles, whatever they're called. Let's call it a marketing scorecard or marketing profile. Partners are really interested in learning from the vendor of what works, what are expectations. So to the extent to which as a vendor, you can say, we've studied our best marketers. We've defined the practices, the skills for list building, for list maintenance, for frequency, for various executional elements. And then once you establish those expectations, to set a scorecard. Here is kind of where you are on your life stage journey, red, yellow, and green, for determining where you are with your own marketing development. And so I think that's an opportunity for kind of applied training, where you're coming to the partner with kind of let's take a 3 to 5 minute assessment of your skill set, create a customized blueprint, and then enable, build from where you are today. What are your relevant strengths and weaknesses? And then you can more pinpoint the targeted services and training that they need to improve their marketing effectiveness.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I might just add to that. So it's kind of, the partners have got a lot going on, and some of them, to the question, can be small enough that they don't have the resource. So this is, a little bit like what Gary said. If you have partners that are successful and you're using automation to drive those campaigns, and you've measured those, you'll know the campaigns that are successful for your brand in the market, and you profile that partner against something similar, and instead of trying to boil the ocean and train them up in marketing, you get them to use the campaigns that have worked for a similar partner in the same ecosystem. That usually works well, we find.
Okay. Anyone else want to come in? Okay.
Well, I just want to, Rod, if I could, I just want to go back to the product comment for just a second, because it sparked another thought in me, and that is how few vendors really involve their partners in product launches. A lot of times they launch a product and then the partner hears about it on the same day as when the general public does. And that robs the partner of, first of all, it feels weird to the partner because like, wait a minute, I thought we were partners, we should know about this. But it also robs them of the opportunity to bring the product to market with you, and to get excited about it and to excite their base about it too. So I just, to put a finer point on the product lifecycle question, involving partners in your product launch is a really key, key way of building excitement around that.
Can I add to that? Because I think it's a great point, and I would go even further to say that it's not just the product, but it's a term that we hear a lot, we use a lot, it's called services prototyping. When you're creating a new product for your brand to bring to market, think about your partners and think about their business model. Yes, they're interested in selling your product and their margins, but to be honest, they're more interested in the services that they can wrap around the sale of that product. So not only involve, as Peter said, involve them earlier in so they can build their campaigns and their business, but help them model services that they can wrap around the sale. They don't, help them. I'm talking about pricing, staffing, positioning, labor. What are the value-added services that I can wrap around the sale of those products?
Okay. I've got a long but really interesting question next from David Brown. What is the panel's thought on putting partners into tiers as part of a way to generate incentives? Obviously, with tiers, higher tiers unlock more benefits. But how does this work when your partner ecosystem may be a mix of smaller organizations that don't have resources? How do you keep them incentivized? So I think two questions here: the value of tiers, and if you've got tiers, are you simply incentivizing the big guys? And how do you keep that incentivization for the smaller people, the long tail, in the program?
Can I make a comment on? Sorry. You mind if I make a? Jay McBain and I wrote an article called, and we got a lot of views on LinkedIn, called Gold, Silver, and Platinum. We had a tombstone, rest in peace. And so that doesn't